Before we begin, if you believe love can still find us later in life, and you want to help keep stories like these alive, you can support The Simple Gay Love on Patreon. Now, let's begin. There are things a man carries that don't show up on any scale. Not in the weight of his bag, not in the hunch of his shoulders. You'd have to crack him open like a walnut to find them, and even then, most people wouldn't know what they were looking at. I was 44 years old the first time I admitted that to myself. Not in a therapist's office, not in the wreckage of my marriage, not even on the night Karen slid the divorce papers across our kitchen table with the calm precision of someone defusing a bomb she'd already decided to let go off. No. I admitted it on a Greyhound bus somewhere between Wichita and a town so small it didn't bother with a welcome sign, staring out the window at a Kansas sky that looked like someone had spilled bourbon across the whole damn horizon. My name is Jack McCaffrey. And for 21 years, I ran into burning buildings for a living. I know what it sounds like when a roof is about to come down. I know the exact pitch of a child screaming through smoke versus an adult. I know how fire moves through drywall, through carpet, through the insulation of a house that someone called home 3 minutes ago. I know all of that. What I didn't know, what I spent 44 years refusing to learn, was how to sit still long enough to feel something without immediately standing up to fix it. The volunteer program was Karen's idea. Well, not Karen's exactly. Her lawyers, if you want to be precise about it. Part of my post-divorce restructuring, they called it. Find something meaningful, something grounding, something that isn't a bar in Bridgeport at 2 a.m. with the ghost of a career sitting across from you. My therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Reeves, who had the unfortunate habit of being right about everything, suggested I look into programs out west. Physical work, open air, limited cell service, the kind of thing that forces you into your own head, whether you want to be there or not. So I found the Hollowell Ranch Roundup, 4,000 acres of tall grass prairie in the Flint Hills of Kansas, a week-long volunteer cattle recovery operation where they send out teams to find animals that wandered off during summer storms. Horseback, camping, no Wi-Fi, no electricity, no escape. I signed up the way you sign up for a root canal, knowing it was probably necessary, hoping it wouldn't be as bad as it sounded. It was the first week of October when I arrived. The bus dropped me at a gas station in Cottonwood Falls, population 903, according to the sign, though I had my doubts. And I stood there in the late afternoon light, with my duffel bag and my Red Wings and my Carhartt cap, feeling more out of place than I'd ever felt in my life. Chicago was concrete and noise, and the comforting anonymity of 8 million people not caring about your problems. This was silence. This was space. This was grass that grew up to your waist and a sky so wide, it felt like the earth was trying to swallow you from above. A truck pulled up. Blue, old, the kind of truck that looks like it remembers the 90s fondly. You McCaffrey? The driver was a woman in her 60s, with the posture of someone who'd never once second-guessed a decision. Bonnie Hollowell. I run operations for the Roundup. That's me. She looked me up and down, the way a horse appraiser looks at a horse. You ride? I've been on a horse. That's not what I asked. I can learn. Bonnie made a sound that might have been a laugh in a past life. Get in. We've got a lot of ground to cover before dark. The ranch was everything the brochure promised and nothing it prepared me for. Rolling hills of blue stem grass stretching in every direction, broken only by lines of limestone fence posts and barbed wire. That looked older than my father. The main house sat on a ridge overlooking a valley where a creek caught the last of the sunlight, like a vein of gold. There were horses in a corral near the barn, a half-dozen trucks parked in various stages of use, and a cluster of canvas tents set up in a clearing that would serve as base camp for the week. About 15 volunteers total, Bonnie explained as she parked. Mix of regulars and newcomers. We pair you up, send you out in teams of 2 or 3. You'll work with our ranch vet. He knows the land better than anyone alive. I nodded, pulling my bag from the truck bed. One more thing, McCaffrey. She waited until I looked at her. This land will open you up if you let it. Most people come here thinking they're helping us find cattle. By the end of the week, they've usually found something else entirely. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. A skill I'd perfected over 2 decades of marriage, perfected so well it had cost me the marriage itself. The other volunteers were already gathered around a fire pit near the tents. A mix of ages, backgrounds, body types, ranchers, retirees, a couple of younger guys who looked like they'd wandered off a hiking trail. I did what I always do in new groups. Found the edge, settled there. Became the quiet guy leaning against the fence post with his arms crossed, observing without participating. It's a position I know well. It's comfortable the way a suit of armor is comfortable. Heavy, isolating, and it keeps everything out. That's when I saw him. He was standing near the fire, gesturing with a tin cup of coffee while he told some story that had 3 people laughing. Cowboy hat the color of sand, pushed back on his head. Hair a little too long, falling across his forehead in waves that the Kansas wind kept rearranging. Lean build, the kind you get from 30 years of wrestling livestock, not from a gym. He wore a shirt the color of dried clay, with the sleeves rolled up, and his forearms were mapped with small scars. The autobiography of a man who'd spent his life with his hands inside things that bit. But it was his face that caught me. Not handsome in any conventional way. Just honest. A face that had been used, laugh lines around the mouth, crow's feet from squinting into sun and distance, and eyes the color of honey held up to light, warm, clear, paying attention to everything. He looked up mid-sentence, saw me, and smiled. Not the polite smile you give a stranger. Something wider, something that said, "There you are," as if he'd been expecting me. I felt something shift in my chest, a small tectonic event, barely registering on the surface. I pulled my Carhartt cap lower over my eyes and looked away. His name was Wade Hollister. Dr. Wade Emerson Hollister, technically, though he introduced himself with just his first name and a handshake that was firm but unhurried. The handshake of a man who had nowhere more important to be. "You must be the firefighter from Chicago?" He had a voice like gravel smoothed by river water, soft underneath the roughness. "Bonnie told me I'd be working with you this week, former firefighter." "Fair enough, former firefighter, current volunteer." He smiled again. "I'm the vet. I know where the cattle like to hide, and I can tell you which mushrooms will kill you versus which ones will just make you wish they had." Useful information? I like to think so. He took a sip of his coffee, studying me over the rim. Long way from Chicago? That's the idea. He nodded slowly, as though I'd said something much more meaningful than I'd intended. "Well, welcome to the Flint Hills, Jack. If you listen close enough out here, you can hear the earth breathe." I almost laughed. Almost. But something in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. The first 2 days were physical in a way that surprised even me, and I'd spent 2 decades hauling 200-pound men out of collapsing buildings. We rode. Out at dawn, me on a patient mare named Dolly, who tolerated my amateur horsemanship with saintly indifference, and worked the eastern hills until the light faded. The terrain was deceptive. What looked like gentle rolling prairie from a distance was actually a maze of hidden ravines. Limestone outcrops and creek beds choked with brush, where a 700-pound steer could vanish like a magic trick. Wade rode beside me most of the time. He knew every fold of that land the way I knew the streets of Bridgeport, instinctively with his body, the way you know something you've loved for a long time. He'd stop occasionally, tilt his head, close his eyes, and listen. "What are you hearing?" I asked the first time he did this. "Heifer. Maybe a mile east. She's not in distress, just lost. Separated from the group probably 2 weeks ago. You can hear the confusion in her call. Shorter intervals, lower pitch. There's a little bit of fear in it, but mostly just loneliness." I listened. I heard wind and grass and my own horse chewing on something she'd found. "Give it time," he said. and the corner of his mouth turned up. Your ears are still tuned to sirens and city noise. Out here, the frequency's different. Everything's slower, deeper. You've got to let the prairie in before you can hear what it's telling you. We found the heifer exactly where he said she'd be, tucked into a ravine beside a spring, looking equal parts relieved and annoyed to see us. Wade guided her out with a calm that bordered on supernatural, clicking his tongue and murmuring things I couldn't quite catch. And the animal followed him, like she'd been waiting specifically for him to arrive. They call him the Whisperer. Bonnie told me that evening around the fire, with an affection she tried to hide under her usual directness. And he hates it. But it's true. That man hears things in animal sounds that the rest of us can't even imagine. I watched Wade across the fire pit. He was writing something in a small moleskin notebook he kept in his breast pocket, his pencil moving in short, focused strokes. He paused occasionally to look up at the sky, as if checking his notes against the stars. "What do you write in there?" I asked later, when it was just the two of us cleaning up the last of the dinner plates. He glanced down at the notebook in his pocket and smiled, almost shy, which surprised me. Looked different on a man his age. That shyness made him look younger, more like whoever he'd been before the world got to him. "Everything," he said. "Weather patterns, animal behavior, things people say that I want to remember." He hesitated for just a moment. Claire used to tease me about it. She'd say, "Wade, you're going to die and someone's going to find 40 years of notebooks and think you were either a genius or completely insane." "Maybe both," I said. He laughed. "Probably both. That's what she said too." On the second night, the group ate together beans and cornbread that one of the older ranchers, a man named Gus, had been perfecting for what he claimed was 40 years. I sat slightly apart, as was my habit, eating in that efficient, joyless way that Karen used to say made me look like a soldier refueling rather than a human being enjoying a meal. Wade appeared beside me without announcement. He had a way of moving through space that was quiet, but not sneaky. Present, not intrusive. Like weather that arrives gently enough you don't notice until it's already surrounding you. "Mind if I sit?" "Free country." He settled onto the log beside me and said nothing for a while. Just ate. Watch the fire. Let the silence do whatever silence does when you're not afraid of it. I noticed his hands. Long-fingered, scarred, tanned a shade darker than the rest of him. Hands that had delivered calves and set broken legs and held dying animals through their last breaths. There was a gentleness in them, even at rest, a kind of permanent readiness to be careful with something fragile. "Can I ask you something?" he said eventually. "Depends." "What's the thing you do with your hand? In your jacket pocket?" "I've noticed it a few times now. You reach in there whenever someone gets too close to something real." I froze. My right hand was, at that very moment, curled around my father's bronze AA coin inside my jacket. A gesture so automatic, I didn't even notice myself doing it anymore. 20 years of reaching for that coin in moments of fear, of anger, of the kind of sadness that doesn't have a bottom. And this man, this stranger, had spotted it in 2 days. "Nothing," I said. "Habit." He looked at me for a long moment. Those honey-colored eyes held no judgment, no curiosity in the invasive sense, just recognition. Like he'd seen the gesture before, in some other context, on some other wounded thing trying to comfort itself. "I've got habits too," he said quietly. "I still set out 2 coffee cups every morning. Claire's been gone 3 years, and I still reach for the second mug. My hand knows where it is before my brain remembers she isn't there to drink it." Something in my chest tightened, not uncomfortably, more like a muscle that had been locked for years finally acknowledging it existed. "Your wife?" He nodded. "Pancreatic cancer. Fast and cruel, like most things that take the people we love. 14 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She'd have liked you, actually. She had a thing for the quiet, broody type. Said they were the most interesting once you got past the wall. I'm not broody." Wade laughed. It was the kind of laugh that came from deep in his body, unguarded and full. And it did something to the air around us, warmed it somehow. Or maybe that was the fire. Sure you're not. And I'm not a man who talks to cattle. We sat there for a while longer. The fire popped and hissed. Someone was playing a guitar badly on the other side of camp. Above us, the Kansas sky was doing that thing. The bourbon sky, the locals called it, where the entire atmosphere turns amber and gold, and you feel like you're sitting inside the last glass of something beautiful. Tell me about Chicago, Wade said, and not the tourist version. Tell me about the version that made you. I don't know why, I answered. I don't know why. With this man I'd known for 48 hours. I started talking about Bridgeport, about my old neighborhood, about Mrs. Kowalski in 4B who made pierogi every Sunday and saved a plate for the fire crew. About Tommy Navarro, who ran the bodega on the corner and always pretended he couldn't see when a neighborhood kid pocketed a candy bar. About the sound of the L train at 3 a.m, that metallic shriek followed by silence that felt like the city was exhaling. About the way Lake Michigan looks in January, when the ice forms along the shore and the whole world goes white and quiet and honest in a way it isn't during any other season. I talked for a long time. Longer than I'd talked to anyone in months, maybe years. Wade listened the way good listeners do, not waiting for his turn, not formulating responses, just receiving. Occasionally, he'd ask a question that showed he was paying attention to details I hadn't even realized I was sharing. Small questions, careful ones. The kind that made me feel like my story mattered to someone besides myself. And every time I paused, every time I hesitated at the edge of something too personal, he didn't push, he just waited, patient as the prairie, like he had all the time in the world and no interest in spending it anywhere else. By the time I stopped, the fire had burned down to embers, and most of the camp had gone to sleep. I felt hollowed out, not empty, lighter, like I'd set down a bag I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my body. Wade closed his moleskin, I hadn't noticed him writing, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. What? I asked. You said something earlier about the lake in winter. How the quiet was the only honest thing left in the city. I said that. You did. He paused, turned the pencil between his fingers. That's beautiful, Jack. You know that, right? I pulled my cap off and put it back on, a nervous tic that had replaced smoking when I quit 10 years ago. Nobody's ever called me beautiful at anything. I didn't say you were beautiful. I said what you said was beautiful. He looked at me for a beat longer than was safe, and then added, almost quietly enough for the wind to take. Though, now that you mention it. He let the sentence trail off, and something passed between us that I didn't have language for. A current, a vibration, the kind of thing that would have sent me running 5 years ago, 10 years ago, all the years of my life before this strange week in the middle of nowhere. And even now, even here, I felt the old machinery kick in, the urge to deflect, to joke, to find something to fix with my hands. My hand found the coin in my pocket. I squeezed it until the edges bit into my palm. I should turn in, I said. Yeah, he agreed. Early morning, neither of us moved. The stars were insane. That's the only word for it. In Chicago, you're lucky to see a handful on a clear night, competing with street lights and neon and the general ambient glow of a city that never fully sleeps. Out here, the sky looked like someone had shattered a chandelier across black velvet. Thousands of them. Millions. Every one of them burning with the quiet conviction of something that has existed long before you and will continue long after. If you're listening to this story right now, drop a comment and tell me what city you're tuning in from. I'd love to know where in the world this story is reaching. The third day, we rode out to the northwestern section of the ranch, an area Wade described as the wild part. Miles of unbroken prairie with no fences, no roads, no evidence that human beings had ever considered this particular stretch of earth worth taming. The grass was taller here, thick enough to swallow a horse up to its belly, and the sky seemed to drop lower, pressing down on us with the weight of all that blue. We were looking for a small group of cattle, 4 head by Bonnie's count, that had bolted during a lightning storm in August and hadn't been seen since. Wade had heard them, or thought he had, 2 mornings ago from the eastern ridge. He'd marked the direction in his notebook with the careful notation of a man who trusted sound the way other people trust sight. We rode in comfortable silence for most of the morning. I was getting better on horseback. My thighs would never forgive me. But Dolly and I had reached an understanding that involved mutual tolerance and the occasional apple. Wade rode the way he did everything. Easily, naturally, like the horse was an extension of his own body rather than a separate animal he was sitting on. Every now and then, he'd lean forward and murmur something to his horse, a bay gelding named Hank Jr., and the horse would adjust its path as if they'd had a full conversation. Around noon, we stopped by a creek to water the horses and eat the sandwiches Gus had packed. Wade sat on a flat limestone rock and pulled off his Stetson, and I watched the wind move through his sun-bleached hair and thought, with a clarity that startled me, this is a good man. This is a genuinely good man. And I have no idea what to do with that. Jack, can I tell you something? Yeah, I know why you left Chicago. I mean, not the details, but I know the shape of it. He looked at me steadily, his sandwich forgotten in his hand, because I recognized the look. It's the same one I see in the mirror. I felt the ground shift, not literally, but close enough. What look? The look of a man who's spent his whole life being something for everyone else and forgot to figure out who he is for himself. He said it gently, like he was describing a wound he'd seen before and knew how to treat. Like it wasn't a judgment, but a diagnosis, offered with the same care he'd give any injured creature. My jaw tightened. That's a hell of an assumption from someone who's known me 3 days. Is it wrong? The honest answer sat in my throat like a stone. I couldn't swallow it, and I couldn't spit it out. So I did what I always do. I deflected. My wife left me. That's the short version. And the long version? The long version will take more than a lunch break. He smiled, gentle and unhurried. We've got 3 more days, Jack. I'm not going anywhere. Something about the way he said it, I'm not going anywhere, landed differently than it should have. It wasn't a casual reassurance. It was a promise. Small, undecorated, and absolutely certain. That night, something shifted. The other volunteers had found their cattle and ridden back to base camp celebrating, but Wade and I were still out. The 4 head we'd been tracking had moved deeper into the hills, and we made the decision to camp overnight rather than ride back in the dark. We set up a simple camp in a sheltered depression between 2 hills. Wade built a fire with the efficiency of long practice, while I unsaddled the horses and staked them on a long line near the creek. The temperature was dropping fast. October nights in Kansas carry a bite that creeps through layers, and by the time we'd eaten and settled near the fire, I could see my breath in the amber light. Wade cooked. That surprised me, though it shouldn't have. He produced a small cast-iron skillet from his saddlebag, like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat, and made something with canned beans and dried beef and a spice mix he carried in a tin that tasted better than anything I'd eaten in a restaurant in the last year. He served it in tin cups, and we ate cross-legged by the fire. And for a few minutes, the only sounds were chewing and the crackle of burning wood and the distant call of something wild moving through the dark. Claire taught me, he said, answering a question I hadn't asked. She believed that food made outdoors tasted better because the sky was the ceiling and the stars were the chandelier. I thought she was being romantic. Turns out she was just right. He was quiet after that. Not the comfortable quiet of the previous days, but something heavier. I watched him stare into the flames, his moleskin unopened in his lap, his thumb tracing the spine of it like a rosary. Claire and I used to do this, he said suddenly. Camp out during Roundup. She wasn't a rancher, Wasn't even a country girl originally, school teacher from Topeka. But she loved this. The sky, the fire, the sound of coyotes arguing in the distance. She used to say the stars out here were so close you could read by them. She sounds like someone I would have liked. Everyone liked Claire. He said it without bitterness, but I heard the weight underneath, the weight of a man who'd been carrying someone's memory so long it had fused to his spine. That was part of what made losing her so impossible. She wasn't just my wife. She was the center of a whole constellation of people. When she died, everyone lost their gravity. Me most of all. I knew that feeling, not from death, but from divorce. The way a shared life comes apart, and suddenly all the people who orbited you as a couple have to choose sides, drift away, or pretend nothing happened. The way you walk through your own home, and it feels like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. After she passed, he continued, his voice lower now, almost blending with the fire. I just kept going. Treated the animals, helped the ranchers, showed up at church on Sundays because that's what you do in Cottonwood Falls. Hank Hollowell, he owns this ranch. He kinda took me under his wing. Treated me like a son, invited me to holidays, made sure I ate. He's a good man, Hank. Old-fashioned in ways that are both beautiful and limiting. But good. I heard the pause. The space he left where something unsaid lived. Limiting how? Wade looked at me over the fire. The flames put moving shadows on his face, and in that moment he looked older, more tired, more human than the easy-smiling man I'd been riding with for 3 days. Hank is 68 years old, and he believes the world works a certain way. Men are a certain thing. Women are a certain thing. Love is a certain thing. He's not cruel about it. He's never said a hateful word in my presence. But the way he talks about his world, there's no room in it for anything he hasn't seen before. And I've been living inside his world for 3 years because it was easier than building my own. The fire crackled. A coyote called from somewhere in the distance, and another answered, closer. Wait, I said, and then stopped. Because what I wanted to say was, I understand. I understand what it means to live inside someone else's idea of who you should be. I understand the comfort of a cage that looks like a home. But the words felt inadequate. Everything I could offer felt like a consolation prize compared to the real thing. He looked at me. The firelight caught the honey in his eyes and turned it to gold. You don't have to say anything, Jack. That's one thing I've learned about grief. And about secrets. Sometimes the best thing someone can do is just be in the same darkness with you. Not trying to fix it. Not trying to light a candle. Just sitting there. Being proof that you're not alone in it. So that's what I did. I sat in the darkness with him, and somewhere in the silence, our shoulders touched, and neither of us moved away. His warmth pressed against my arm through 2 layers of flannel, and I felt it the way you feel the first warm day after a long winter. Not just on your skin, but somewhere deeper. Somewhere that had been frozen for so long you'd forgotten it could thaw. I woke before dawn. The fire had died to a bed of coals, and the sky above was that deep purple black that comes just before the light. Wade was already awake, sitting with his back against a rock, his Stetson tipped back, watching me with an expression that he didn't bother to hide when I opened my eyes. Something soft, something careful, something that made my pulse do things it hadn't done since I was 22. Morning, he said. How long have you been up? A while. He held out a tin cup. Made coffee? Well, made what passes for coffee when your kitchen is a fire and a tin pot. I took the cup. Our fingers touched on the handle, and I felt it again. That current, that low-frequency hum that had been building between us since the first night. I pulled my hand back too quickly, and coffee sloshed over the rim. Wade said nothing. Just poured himself another cup and looked out at the horizon, where the first pale line of dawn was starting to burn through the dark like a secret being told. We found 2 of the 4 cattle that morning. They were huddled in a ravine about 3 miles north, thin but uninjured, and Wade checked them over with the calm expertise of 30 years, his hands moving over their bodies the way a pianist's move over keys, certain, tender, purposeful. "This one's got a slight limp," he said, running his palm down a heifer's foreleg. "Nothing broken. Probably turned her ankle in a prairie dog hole. She'll be fine in a week with some rest and decent feed." I watched him work and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Admiration. Not the distant kind you feel for athletes or heroes on the news. The close, dangerous kind. The kind that makes you want to know everything about a person. What they dream about, what they're afraid of, what their face looks like in the morning before they remember to perform for the world. The kind that makes you want to be known by them in the same way. That evening, back at the main camp, I sat alone on the ridge behind the tents, looking out at the valley. The sun was setting, and the sky was doing its bourbon trick again. That deep amber gold that made everything look like a memory of something beautiful you didn't realize was beautiful, until it was already gone. Wade found me there. Of course he did. He had a compass for people sitting alone with things they couldn't say. He sat down beside me, closer than he needed to, his shoulder against mine, his knee almost touching my knee. The warmth of him was real, specific, undeniable. "Jack," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen. Don't react, don't deflect, don't make a joke or find something to fix. Just hear me." My hand found the coin. I squeezed. "Okay, I see you," he said softly. "And I don't mean that in some vague, philosophical way. I mean, I literally see you. I see the way you pull your cap down when something gets too close. I see the way you grip whatever's in your pocket when a conversation turns personal. I see the way you check yourself every time you almost say something real. Like there's a guard in your head with a whistle, blowing it every time the real Jack tries to step forward." He paused, took a breath. "And I see the way you watch me when you think I'm not looking. And the way you look away the second I turn my head. Like you're afraid I'll see what you're seeing when you look at me." My heart was hammering. Actually, physically hammering, the way it used to before entering a building fully engulfed. The same fear, the same knowledge that what was on the other side might change everything. "I don't know what you're—" I started. "Yes, you do." His voice was gentle but certain. The voice of a man who'd spent a lifetime listening closely enough to know the difference between a lie and the truth, even when they sounded the same. "You know exactly what I'm saying. And I think you've known for longer than just this week." The bourbon sky was fading into something deeper. Purple. Indigo. The first star appeared, sharp and solitary, like a witness. My ex-wife found messages on my phone. The words came out of me the way smoke comes out of a building. Not because it wants to leave, but because there's no more room inside to contain it. Messages to a guy I worked with? Rob. His name was Rob. Nothing happened. Nothing physical. But the messages they were honest. They were the most honest things I'd ever written in my life. And Karen read them, and she didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She just sat down at the kitchen table and said, "Jack, I can forgive a lot of things. I can forgive the missed dinners and the holidays at the station and the way you flinch when I touch you in public. But I can't forgive you for making me a wall you hide behind." I stopped. My throat was tight. My eyes were burning with something I hadn't allowed in years. "What did she mean?" Wade asked, even though I could tell he already knew. "She meant exactly what you think she meant. I married her because she was safe, because she made sense, because a firefighter from Bridgeport with an Irish Catholic father who died clutching his AA coin doesn't get to be anything other than what everyone expects him to be. And what they expected me to be was married. Normal, whole, silence. The kind that has texture, the kind you can lean against. I never said it out loud, I whispered. What those messages meant. What I meant. Not once. Not to Rob, not to Karen, not to Dr. Reeves, not to my brother, not to God, not to anyone. I buried it so deep and so long that most days I almost believed it wasn't there. Almost. And then I came here, I said, and I met you. My hand was shaking. The coin was pressed so deep into my palm I'd find its imprint there for hours. And then Wade did something no one had ever done. He reached over, gently, so gently, and took my closed fist in both his hands. He didn't try to open it. Didn't try to take the coin, just held my fist, my secret, my shame, the whole compressed weight of 44 years of silence, and held it like it was something worth holding, like it was something precious. You're not hiding anymore, Jack. He said it simply. No drama. No grand gesture. Just fact. You're sitting on a hill in the middle of Kansas, telling the truth to a man who wants to hear it. That's not hiding. That's the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. And I've watched bulls charge fences. I looked at him, at his honest face, his honey eyes, the wind moving through his hair, the firelight from the camp below catching the silver of his father's Stetson. And for the first time in 44 years, I didn't look away. What happens now? I asked. He smiled. That full, unguarded, lived-in smile that I was beginning to realize was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in a life that had shown me plenty of fire and not nearly enough light. Now, he said, we sit here for a while, and we let the sky do what it does. So we did. We sat on that ridge with his hands around my fist and the prairie stretching out in every direction, boundless, unfenced. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like something I needed to escape. It felt like something I'd finally come home to. And his hands were warm. That's what I keep coming back to. In all the noise and fear and machinery of that moment, his hands were warm. 2 more days. That's what we had left. 2 more days of riding together, sleeping under the same sky, building fires, and telling truths. 2 more days before my Greyhound ticket back to Chicago and whatever was left of a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. And Wade. Wade had a job offer in Wichita. A bigger clinic, better pay. A chance to start over somewhere that didn't remind him of Claire with every sunrise. But Wichita also meant leaving the ranch. Leaving Hank, the man who'd become his family when his real family was taken from him. Leaving the only land that still felt like home. We both had exits planned. We both had reasons to leave. But sitting there on that hill, with the stars coming out one by one like promises someone was finally keeping, I realized something that terrified me more than any burning building ever had. I didn't want to go. And from the way Wade was holding my hand, not letting go, not pulling away, just holding on like it was the most natural thing in the world, like his hand had been waiting for mine the way the prairie waits for rain. I don't think he did either. So if you've made it this far in this story, I want to hear from you. Are you feeling this? Drop a number from 0 to 10 in the comments and let me know. And if this story stayed with you, if you want to know what happens next. The continuation is waiting for you on Patreon. I share exclusive stories and alternate endings there each month. Thank you for being here and for believing in simple gay love.
Enjoyed this story? Good, because I have so much more to tell you, but those other ones I can't put out here. It's not for everyone. It's for those who really want to go deep. On my Patreon, the stories are more intense, more free, more real. No censorship, no filter, no limitations. It's the place where I can truly explore everything these characters live, feel, and desire. Things that don't make it out here. And trust me, there's a lot waiting for you. And it's not just content, it's a community. A closed space for those who want real representation, who want to support the LGBTQ+ cause and have access to benefits nobody else has. Early content, behind the scenes, stories only members get to know, and a group of people who think just like you. A place where we can talk about everything, without judgment, without limits. There are already a lot of people inside following stories you don't even know exist yet. And every month, there's something new coming. Getting in is easy. Point your phone camera at the QR code on screen right now, or use the link in the first pinned comment down below or in the video description. In less than 2 minutes, you're already part of it. See you on the other side.